and you're able to throw at a team where you're going to have Pritchard at the 1, Beal at the 2, Tatum, Brown, and Robert Williams at center or something like that. That's turning into a lineup that actually looks really good. When your point guard situation would have been scary if you had to, when you think about it started to look really dire when they had only Smart there and Pritchard, and you're like, oh, is that going to work? But Pritchard really looks like he could be the point guard of the future. Obviously, you look at his shooting percentage, his 3-point shooting percentage, it's ridiculous. It's crazy good. So having that next to the Jays and Beal potentially next summer, if it comes down to that, when you have to let Schroeder walk and all these other guys walk, the prospect of that isn't as bad as maybe you would have assumed a year ago or even a few months ago. It seems like Pritchard could really, really be a starter in the league, and next to the Jays and Beal would thrive in that kind of spot up off the ball role, setting them up as a playmaker. Obviously, you mentioned the 12 assists tonight, but also being someone that's going to draw attention away. So people have to, stay out on him on the 3-point line, and they can't just collapse on your star players. So having him potentially be a guy that you can put around those guys next summer is really, really exciting.
No, yeah. I mean, if Pritchard stays on this path, I think he could realistically make an argument to be the starting point guard. Obviously, depending on whether or not they're able to retain Smart, but his shooting is elite, as you've pointed out throughout last season with the Celtics history 3-point percentage stat. But he just seems like he's a very smart, very all-around point guard. He can pass really well if the ball's in his hands, obviously showing that in Summer League now. He can shoot 40% from 3. Hopefully he can keep that up next year. 8 rebounds tonight, obviously it was Summer League, but like for a 6'1 guard, you got to talk about the 8 rebounds too. And he's a scrappy defender, despite being undersized. He's everything you want, and he's under contract through the 2023-24 season for around $4 million or less. Next year he'll be 2.1 mil. The year after that, 2.2 mil. Then it goes up to 4 mil in the last year of his team options from his rookie deal. So it's just exactly what you wanted. I will say a nice parting gift from Danny Ainge with his final draft pick.
Yeah, and I think the idea, if you can somehow, and I have to do the math on this still, but I think that some of these guys, some of these prospects you would have to move off of to make the room for Beal. You're going to have to clear almost everybody off your roster. I think that Grant Williams has to go. I think Romeo Langford, even though he's shown some stuff, that dunk today was crazy, I think he'll probably have to go, and you'll have to find a way to clear Horford out. But I think the 3 guys that you definitely want to keep, if we're talking about the young guys right now, it's Peyton Pritchard, it's Robert Williams, and it's Aaron Nesmith. I think those guys have solidified themselves as potential players that could be part of your core moving forward here as you emerge back into a contender over the next couple of years after falling off the last 2.
Yeah.
Or the last 1, I should say, really.
I agree. And, maybe this is a hot take, but if we're getting to that point, I'd probably take Pritchard and Nesmith over Robert Williams because of the injuries. I mean, maybe that's a hot take. Maybe that's, a little harsh on Rob. But if we're getting down to it and you have to get rid of one of those 3, I'd probably get rid of Rob.
Wow. I feel almost the opposite. And I wanted to mention this at some point on YouTube, and maybe it'll be right now. I think that people have been searching for the 3rd star for the Celtics. And it might be Bradley Beal. It very well could be Bradley Beal if they can get him next offseason. But the 3rd star, to me, might already be on the roster, and it might actually be Robert Williams. He's such a coiled spring, and he could go anywhere in the world. But he could go right down the tubes. He could continue to be injury prone. He could never help you in any significant way for the rest of his career. And he could just as easily become one of the elite defenders in the league, a Rudy Gobert-type presence. And you look at what Rudy Gobert is for the Jazz, helping them get the 1 seed last year, being their 2nd star next to Donovan Mitchell. I really think Robert Williams has the potential to be that kind of defensive ace next to the Jays. So I know it's not traditionally what we think of as the 3rd star. You think of 3 players that can score at an elite level, that someone has to sacrifice, someone has to give up the ball, because not everybody can score as much as they need to. So you have Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh has to sacrifice, or Kevin Love has to sacrifice, or whoever it may be in a year-to-year basis during those big threes, and you're seeing it with the Nets now too, with Irving, Harden, and Durant. But there are big threes that work too, where it's not just 3 offensive superstars coming together. The 3rd star could be just a star on the defensive end, and I really think that Robert Williams has the potential to be that. So if it came down to it for me right now between those 3, I still have Robert Williams ranked number one because I think his ceiling is the highest in terms of being an all NBA defensive player. I think that he can be an all defensive team player in his future if things go the right way. But things might not go that way. Like I just said, you never know how things are gonna end up turning around for that guy. It seems like very unpredictable. But he's just been so good at times. I mean, you remember that game? What did he have? 8 blocks against Brooklyn, 7, 8, 9 blocks against Brooklyn. Yeah, nine. In the playoffs. Like that is historic level stuff. Yeah. And if he can keep that, if he can continue on that trajectory, he's still so young too. Like he could be a really, really special player for Boston. And I think he could be a defensive star on the level of Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, I mean, I'd compare him more to Clint Capella than Rudy Gobert because of the athleticism. But I think my biggest issue with Rob is that his ceiling is probably the highest out of those three, but his floor is also by far the lowest in my opinion, which is a huge issue when I'm looking at building with the Jays, right? Realistically, you got, 3, 4, 5 more years building with the Jays to build that core around them for them to say, okay, yeah, let's sign another contract in Boston, let's do this. Robert Williams has yet to play over 20 minutes a game in a season, right? Injured his first season, injured his second season, injured, scattered throughout last season. He played 52 games last year, which is by far the best, but still played 18.9 minutes per game in those because he was just always hurt. So I totally agree with you. I think at his peak, I think he can be one of the best defensive centers in the league. He can pass super well, which is an underrated skill he has. He's a scrappy rebounder, getting on that offensive glass, average near 2 blocks a game, super efficient scorer, pick and roll, lob threat, all those things. Super, super, super high ceiling, yes. But if we're talking about building around the Jays, he's got to stay on the court.